So, uh, if you were asked to make a human body last for, say, 3,000 years, where would you even start?
It sounds like a sci-fi question, but for the ancient Egyptians, this was, well, it was the central mission of their entire spiritual life.
Right. Death wasn't really an end for them. It was more like the most important road trip you could ever take, a transition.
And it was a trip you had to prepare for very carefully. They believed a person was made up of different spiritual parts. The two big ones were the Ka, your life force, and the Ba, which was more like your personality.
And here's the catch, right? Both the Ka and the Ba needed to find their way back to a physical body, a home base.
Exactly. If your body decayed, if it was gone, those spiritual parts were just lost,
Yep.
adrift forever, no eternal life.
Which means no getting to the field of reeds, which was their version of paradise.
So preserving the body wasn't just a good idea, it was a religious necessity. And that's what led them to develop this incredibly complex 70-day mummification process.
70 days. That's over 2 months. Okay, so let's start at day one. What happens first?
The moment someone died, the body was taken to a special workshop, usually near the Nile, called the Place of Purification.
And I'm guessing purification means washing.
Yes, but very specifically. The embalmers would wash the body with water taken directly from the sacred Nile River. It was a physical cleansing, sure, but it was also deeply spiritual.
And then they had to stop the decay from starting, right?
Immediately, they'd rinse the skin with palm wine. The alcohol in the wine was a great disinfectant. They'd also use different spices to help with that.
I can only imagine what those workshops smelled like.
Intense. You'd have incense burning constantly, frankincense, myrrh, strong herbs. It was partly for the ritual, but also, very practical for covering up the odors.
This wasn't something a family just did themselves, was it? This was a professional.
Oh, a very expensive one. Families would pay huge amounts of money for the best care. This was a serious professional industry.
It really shows how important this whole belief system was. So after the washing, what's next? You have to deal with what's inside the body.
Right. If you want to stop decay, you have to get rid of moisture, and most of the moisture is in the internal organs.
So they have to come out.
Yep. An embalmer would make a small, precise cut on the left side of the abdomen, usually with a super sharp blade made of obsidian.
And what did they take out?
The stomach, the intestines, the lungs, and the liver. Those are the organs that would rot the fastest and destroy the body from the inside.
They didn't just throw them away, though, did they?
No, absolutely not. Those organs were seen as essential. They were washed, treated separately with oils, and then each one was placed in its own special container called a canopic jar.
Okay, but they left one major organ inside. And it's a surprising one.
The heart. The heart was almost always left inside the body.
Why the heart? Why was it so special?
Because they believed the heart was the center of everything, your intelligence, your emotions, your memory. It was like the command center for your entire being.
And you needed it for what came next.
You absolutely needed it for the final judgment. The belief was your heart would be weighed on a scale against a feather, the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth.
So if your heart wasn't there, your whole journey to the afterlife was basically over before it started.
Pretty much. Removing it would have been a catastrophe.
It's fascinating because they were so careful with the heart, but their view of the actual command center, the brain, was completely different.
I mean, it's almost funny. They thought the brain was completely useless, just a source of mucus that needed to be thrown out.
So how do you get rid of the brain without, ruining the head?
It was pretty graphic. They'd take a long, thin bronze hook, sort of like a probe,
And just go right up to the nose?
right up through the nostrils and into the skull, and they wouldn't pull it out in one piece. The goal was to basically whisk the brain until it turned into a liquid.
Wow.
Then they would just tilt the head and let it all drain out through the nose.
And they'd rinse out whatever was left.
Meticulously. With water and more palm wine, you couldn't leave anything behind. Then they'd often fill the empty skull with resin or linen to make sure the head kept its shape.
It all comes back to keeping that recognizable form. But the most important part was still getting the body completely dry.
Exactly. And that brings us to the real scientific genius of the whole process. The dehydration.
This is the 40-day salt bath.
Sort of. They
Yeah.
would completely bury the body in a huge pile of special kind of salt called natron.
Natron. Okay, so what is that? It's not just table salt.
No, it's a naturally occurring mix of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate. Basically, salt and baking soda on steroids. It's found in dry lake beds in Egypt.
And it works better because...
Two reasons. First, it's incredibly good at absorbing water. It just pulls every last drop of moisture from the tissues. And second, it kills all the bacteria that cause the body to decompose. It dries and sterilizes at the same time.
And it took 40 days.
About 40 days, yeah. That number was probably both scientific enough time to dry everything out and religiously significant. 40 is a big number for periods of transformation in a lot of ancient beliefs.
What did the body look like when it came out?
The change was dramatic. It would have lost a huge amount of its weight, and the skin would be dark, tough, and leathery, very shriveled.
So, not exactly ready for an eternal paradise. It doesn't look like a person anymore.
Right. The dehydration part is done, but now the artistic part begins. The last 30 days were all about restoring the body's appearance.
Making it look human again. How do they do that?
Well, all those empty cavities in the chest and abdomen had to be filled. They'd stuff them with linen, sawdust, sometimes even fragrant herbs and lichen.
And they even tried to make it look like they had muscles again.
They did. They put padding under the skin of the arms and legs to give them a more lifelike, plumped-up shape.
What about the face? The eyes would look sunken in, I'd imagine.
Yep, so they'd put small stones or little pads of linen under the eyelids to make them look full again. The goal was to create an idealized, healthy-looking version of the person.
So the spirit, the bear, could recognize its home.
Precisely. And to finish the restoration, they'd rub the entire body down with a mixture of cedar oil, wax, and other spices. This made the skin more flexible and also gave it a pleasant smell.
Okay, so the body is restored. Now it needs to be protected.
This is the final seal. The whole body was coated in a thick layer of hot, black liquid resin.
That's where that classic dark look of mummies comes from.
It is, and that resin was so important. It created a waterproof, airtight seal, and it also acted like a glue for the next step.
The wrapping.
The wrapping, which was a whole ritual in itself. It could take up to 15 days just to do the wrapping.
15 days.
They used hundreds and hundreds of yards of linen bandages. They'd start by wrapping each finger and each toe individually.
Wow, the level of detail is just incredible.
And then they'd move to the limbs, the torso, and the head. And every few layers, they'd paint on more hot resin, basically fusing the bandages together into a hard protective shell.
But it wasn't just about physical protection. There was magic involved here, too.
That's a lot of magic. As they were wrapping, priests would place little magical charms, called amulets, in between the layers of linen.
What kind of amulets?
All sorts. The most important one was the heart scarab, a beetle-shaped charm placed over the chest. It was meant to prevent the real heart from speaking out against the person during their judgment.
Like a magical insurance policy.
Exactly. They also used the jed pillar for stability and the Eye of Horus for protection and healing. And all the while, priests would be reciting spells to activate these charms.
So now the body is completely wrapped and sealed. What's the final touch?
The funeral mask. This goes over the head and shoulders of the wrapped mummy.
And for pharaohs, that would be solid gold, like Tutankhamun's.
Yes. For others, it might be made of wood or a kind of plaster and linen mixture called cartonnage. But the key thing is, the mask was always a perfect, idealized, youthful version of the person.
To make it extra easy for the soul to recognize its body.
That's the idea. Then the mummy, with its mask, was placed inside one or more decorated coffins, shaped like a human.
And those were covered in spells and paintings.
Basically a cheat sheet for the afterlife. Spells from the Book of the Dead to help them on their journey.
But there was one last ceremony, right? Something to, like, switch everything on.
The opening of the mouth ceremony? This was absolutely critical. It was performed right outside the tomb. A priest would use a special tool to touch the mouth and eyes on the mask.
What'd that do?
It symbolically restored the person's senses. It gave them the ability to speak, eat, drink, and see in the afterlife. Without this ritual, they'd be trapped in a body that couldn't function.
It's the final step to guarantee they can enjoy eternal life.
It is. After that, the coffin was placed inside a big stone sarcophagus deep inside the tomb.
And the tomb was filled with all their stuff. Furniture, food, jewelry.
Everything they would need. They even included little servant statues called ushaptis, who were meant to magically come to life and do any work for them in the afterlife.
So the rich person didn't have to do any farming in the field of reeds.
That was the plan. Then the tomb was sealed, hidden away to protect it from robbers.
And the belief was that as long as the person's name was spoken and their body was safe, they would live forever. It's just an amazing combination of science, art, and religion.
It truly is. It gives us such a clear window into how they thought about life, death, and what comes next.
And here's something to think about. When we look at all the treasures from a tomb, we always focus on the gold mask or the big flashy jewels. But for the Egyptians, the most valuable things on that money were probably those tiny little amulets tucked into the bandages, the spiritual tools they absolutely needed to survive the journey ahead.
See you next time.